Have you ever felt like you're living a life that isn't really yours? Like you're playing a role in someone else's movie, but deep down, you know something isn't right. If you're nodding, you're not alone. Today, I'm going to take you on a magical journey, a true story of finding yourself inspired by the wisdom of Carl Jung, the psychologist who changed the way we see the human psyche. This isn't a dry lecture. It's an invitation, a door that leads you to the most authentic version of yourself. Imagine you're standing in front of a treasure hidden deep within your mind, and I'm the one who's going to hand you the key. But be warned, once you open this door, your life will never be the same again. Are you ready? Let's get started. My name is Mike, and I'm a regular guy in Chicago working in a shiny office downtown, driving through busy streets every day and trying to live what everyone says is a good life. But a few years ago, I felt stuck. I had a good job at an advertising agency, a nice apartment in Wicker Park, and weekend nights out drinking with friends at bars on Clark Street. Everything looked perfect on Instagram, but inside I felt empty. There were nights when I sat on the couch staring at the TV without really watching, wondering, is this all there is to life? I didn't know it at the time, but it felt like a call from my soul, a signal that Carl Jung called a whisper from the unconscious. Carl Jung, if you don't know, was a Swiss psychologist who lived in the last century, but his words still resonate today, especially for people like me who are searching for meaning in a noisy world. Jung didn't just study the mind. He explored it like an explorer entering a dense forest. He believed that within each of us there is an inner universe, a mysterious place that contains parts of ourselves that we often keep hidden. One of Jung's most powerful concepts is the shadow, the pieces of yourself that you don't want the world to see. It could be the anger you hold back, the fear of rejection, or a dream you've long buried. I used to think of myself as a good person, always smiling, always helping people. But Jung taught me that pretending that bad emotions don't exist only makes them stronger. Let me tell you about Emily, a friend I met at a yoga class in Lincoln Park. Emily was the kind of person everyone loved. She worked at a nonprofit in Evanston, was always organizing fundraisers, and had a smile so bright you thought she was never sad. But one day, over coffee at Starbucks, Emily confessed that she felt like she was living a double life. On the outside, she was perfect. On the inside, she struggled with resentment. She told me that she grew up in a small town in Ohio where her family expected her to be good. She gave up her dream of becoming a playwright to pursue a path her parents thought safe. "I feel like I'm betraying myself every day," she said, her eyes filling with tears. This was Emily's shadow, the theater dream she had buried, the anger she couldn't admit. When she began writing again, even if it was just short plays at night, she felt like she was coming back to life. Emily's story made me wonder, what am I hiding inside myself? For me, my shadow came in the form of strange dreams. I started dreaming that I was trapped in a windowless room banging on the walls without anyone hearing me. At first I thought these were just random dreams, but then I read about Jung and how he believed dreams were the language of the unconscious. I started recording my dreams in a small notebook that I kept on my nightstand. One night I dreamed that I was standing in front of a locked door, and a voice whispered, "Open it." I woke up, my heart pounding, wondering, what was that door? What was inside me, crying out for help? It was these dreams that made me look back at my life. I realized I had spent too many years trying to please my boss, my friends, even strangers on social media. I had ignored the voice inside the little voice that told me I was meant for something bigger. One day, while sitting in a coffee shop in Andersonville, I overheard a conversation between two strangers. One said, "Sometimes life sends you signs, but you have to pay attention." That made me shiver because it reminded me of another Jungian concept, synchronicity. Jung believed that life is not a series of random events. There are moments when the outside world seems to reflect what is happening in your soul, as if the universe is sending you a message. I've experienced it. A week after the door dream, I was walking through a used bookstore in Logan Square when a book fell off the shelf right in front of me. It was Jung's Man and His Symbols. I'm not the type to believe in fate, but that moment felt like an invitation. I bought the book and it changed the way I saw things. Think about Jennifer, a former co-worker of mine at an advertising agency. Jennifer was a star in the industry, always landing big contracts, always appearing in 30 under 30 articles. But one day, she confided in me over lunch at a sandwich shop near the office. She said she felt like she was running on a hamster wheel, working 80 hours a week to prove her worth. Then something strange happened. She was considering quitting her job when she received an email from a college friend inviting her to join an education startup. Miraculously, she had dreamed about teaching a few nights earlier. I felt like the universe was screaming at me, she says. Jennifer quit her job, joined the project, and now runs an organization that helps kids on the South Side learn coding skills. Synchronicity isn't magic. It's your unconscious way of communicating with the world. I started noticing moments of synchronicity in my own life. One time I was thinking about leaving Chicago to start over somewhere new when a friend called and told me about a job opportunity in Seattle. Another time I was wondering if I should try writing something I'd always wanted to do but never dared to do when I found a note in an old jacket pocket that read, "Tell your story." I don't remember when I wrote it, but it gave me goosebumps. These moments, Jung said, are signs that you're on the right track. But to recognize them, you have to listen, not just with your ears, but with your heart. Back to me, I realized that my sense of emptiness came from living a life that wasn't my own. I worked in advertising because it was stable, but I hated having to pretend to be excited about campaigns selling soda or sneakers. I began to ask myself, if I weren't afraid of failure, what would I do? The answer surprised me. I wanted to tell stories, not through 30-second commercials, but through real, inspiring stories. But to get there, I had to confront my shadow self, the fear of judgment, the fear that I wasn't good enough. Jung called this the journey of individuation, the process of becoming who you really are, not the version that society wants you to be. Let me tell you about Tom, a guy I met at a psychology conference in Denver. Tom is a software engineer in Silicon Valley, lives in a swanky San Francisco apartment, drives a Tesla, and seems successful by every standard. But Tom told me he felt like a fraud. He grew up in a poor neighborhood in Atlanta and always felt like he had to prove himself. He ignored his true passion, photography, because he thought it wasn't realistic. After reading about young Tom, started taking photos on the weekends, posting them on Instagram, and unexpectedly got an offer from a gallery in Oakland. He now works part-time as a photographer and says he's never been happier. Tom's story reminds me that individuation isn't about becoming someone new. It's about finding the pieces of yourself that you've lost. For me, the journey to individuation begins with small steps. I started blogging at night, sharing my thoughts on life, Jung, and dreams. At first, I was afraid that no one would read it, but then I got an email from a stranger in Texas who said my writing had helped her regain her faith in herself. That moment made me realize when you are true to yourself, you not only change your life, but you inspire others. Jung called this the collective consciousness transformation, the idea that when you heal your wounds, you contribute to making the world a better place. But I'll be honest, the journey hasn't been easy. There have been days when I doubted myself, wondering if I was on the right path. One time I applied for a freelance writing job and was rejected. I felt like the whole world was telling me I wasn't good enough. But then I remembered Jung's words, "There is no awakening without pain. Pain is not the enemy. It's a sign that you're growing." I kept writing, kept exploring, and little by little I started getting small writing gigs. Each small step was a victory, a reminder that I was getting closer to who I truly was. Think about Sarah, a single mother in Portland, Oregon, who I interviewed for this video. Sarah works at a bookstore, but she always felt like she didn't belong. She grew up in a conservative family where she was taught that strong emotions were wrong. Reading about Jung's shadow, Sarah realized that she had been repressing her anger at the expectations her family placed on her, anger that she had never been able to be herself. She started attending a therapy group where she learned to express her emotions. I used to think anger was bad, she says, but now I see that it's part of me and it helps me set boundaries. Sarah is now studying to be a counselor, helping others explore their emotions. Her story is proof that facing her shadow isn't a weakness, it's a strength. I've had other synchronistic moments that made me believe I was on the right track. One time I was walking through Millennium Park in Chicago thinking about whether I should make a YouTube video about Jung. Just then, a stranger walked by and said, "Hey, you should share your story. The world needs to hear it." I stood there, not believing my ears. Was it a coincidence? Or was the universe whispering to me? I decided to trust the sign, and that's why you're watching this video right now. My journey is ongoing, and I know it will never truly end. Jung said that individuation is a lifelong process, not a destination, but a path. There are days when I feel powerful, like I can conquer the world. There are days when I feel lost, wondering if I'm deluding myself. But I've learned to embrace those storms. I've learned to listen to my dreams, to my intuition, to the synchronicities that life sends my way. And most of all, I've learned to trust myself. Consider James, a man I met at a writing workshop in Austin. James is a New York banker who lives the life most people dream of: an apartment in Manhattan, vacations in the Maldives, and a long list of friends. But James told me he felt like he was dying inside. He grew up in a working-class neighborhood in Brooklyn, and he always felt like he had to get ahead by being someone else. Reading about Jung, James started keeping a journal and realized he had repressed his love of cooking, a passion he shared with his grandmother. He took up cooking on the weekends, and now he runs a home cooking service in Brooklyn. "I feel like I'm living for the first time," he said. James's story reminds me that it's never too late to find yourself again. If you're watching this video and feeling a little moved, this is your invitation. Start with a small step. Tonight, grab a piece of paper and write down a truth about yourself that you've been avoiding. Maybe it's a dream you've given up on, a fear you're afraid to face, or a part of yourself you've been hiding. Then do something, no matter how small, to move you closer to that truth. Maybe it's writing a story, saying no to something you don't want to do, or simply sitting still and listening to your heart. Every step you take is a declaration that you deserve to be your true self. And here's the best part: when you start living your true self, you don't just change your life, you create a ripple effect. When I started sharing my story, I got messages from people all over the country, from California to Florida, saying that they'd started journaling, pursued a passion, or simply felt less alone. Jung believed that when you heal yourself, you help heal the world. Imagine what it would be like if we all dared to be real, a world where people didn't hide behind masks, where authenticity was more valued than perfection. I'm still on my journey, and I know you are too. Maybe you're in Seattle, sitting in a coffee shop, wondering if you should change jobs. Maybe you're in Atlanta, driving through familiar streets, feeling a void you can't explain. Wherever you are, know that you're not alone. The universe is whispering to you through dreams, through synchronicities, through your own heart. All you have to do is listen. I'll continue this story because I know you want to hear more. Think of Anna, a high school teacher in Boston. Anna has always been perfect, straight A's, a cheerleader, and now a beloved teacher. But Anna told me she felt like she was living a lie. She grew up in a family where strong emotions were seen as weakness. Reading about Jung's shadow, Anna realized she had been repressing her own trauma, wounds from being bullied as a child. She started taking acting classes where she can express my emotions through acting. I feel like I'm finding a part of myself again, she says. Anna is now writing a book about her experience, hoping to help her students feel safe in their own skin. Anna's story made me think about the times I told myself I had to be strong. I grew up in the Chicago suburbs where my dad always said, "Boys don't cry." But as I began to explore my shadow, I realized that admitting sadness or fear didn't make me weaker, it made me more human. I started talking more openly with my friends, and surprisingly, they started sharing their stories too. One friend, Mark, told me that he had given up on his dream of becoming a musician because he was afraid of being judged by his family. After hearing about Jung, Mark bought his guitar and started playing in coffee shops in Wrigleyville. I felt like I was coming back to life, he said. Stories like this made me realize the power of being authentic. When you dare to face your shadow, you don't just free yourself, you create a safe space for others to do the same. I started organizing small meetups in Chicago where people could share their stories. One time, a woman named Lisa came and said she had abandoned her passion for painting to become an accountant, thinking it was more realistic. After hearing about Jung, Lisa started painting again, and now she has a small exhibition at a gallery in Pilsen. "I no longer feel like I'm living the wrong life," she said, and her smile was radiant. This journey, as Jung said, is about becoming whole, not perfect, but whole. It means embracing every part of you, your dreams, your fears, your wounds, and even the moments when you feel like you're brilliant. For me, it means continuing to write, continuing to make videos, continuing to share your story. There are days when I wake up and feel like I can change the world. There are days when I just want to hide under the covers and forget about everything. But I've learned that both of those days are part of me, and both of those days bring me closer to who I truly am. Think about David, a man I met at a conference in San Diego. David is a doctor in Los Angeles, living the life everyone admires, a mansion in Beverly Hills, vacations in Hawaii, and a perfect family on Facebook. But David told me he felt like a puppet. He became a doctor because his parents wanted him to, but his true passion was writing poetry. After reading Jung's individuation, David began writing again, and now he's published a book of poetry that's sold in independent bookstores across California. "I felt like I was breathing for the first time," he says. David's story reminds me that it's never too late to find yourself, no matter where you are in life. If you're still reading, I want you to pause for a second and ask yourself, what's inside you that's waiting to be heard? Maybe it's a dream you've given up on, a fear you've been hiding, or a moment when you felt truly alive. Write it down. Say it. Do something, no matter how small, to honor that truth. Because this is what I learned from Jung. Life isn't about finding happiness. It's about finding meaning. And meaning comes when you dare to be true to yourself no matter what the world says. I'm still on my journey, and I know it will last a lifetime. But every step I take, every dream I record, every story I share, every synchronicity I experience is a reminder that I'm living my true self. And I want you to know that you can do it too. Whether you're in New York, Miami, or a small town in Iowa, you have the power to rewrite your story. You have the power to become who you were born to be. So what are you going to do next? Share your story. Write a comment. Send a message or tell a friend. Let the world know that you're on your journey to self-discovery. Because when you do, you don't just change your life, you change the world. And I'll be here telling this story until you tell me to stop. And then things get weirder. I thought I was beginning to understand the shadow, the synchronicity, the journey of individuation, but life, as Jung said, has a way of challenging you just when you think you have it all figured out. One evening, as I sat in my apartment in Wicker Park, blogging about what I had learned from Jung, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. It was almost 10 p.m., and I lived alone. My heart was pounding as I opened the door, and there stood Emily, my friend from yoga with red eyes and an old backpack over her shoulder. "Mike, I need to talk," she said, her voice shaking. I invited her in, made her a cup of tea, and listened to the story that made me shiver. Herself. Emily says that after she began writing plays, she found an old box of letters in her mother's basement in Ohio. Inside were letters she had written as a 12-year-old, dreaming of becoming a Broadway playwright. But the shocking thing was that the letters weren't just hers. There were notes written by someone else in strange handwriting about dreams that were exactly like hers. "I think they were from my mother," Emily whispers. "But she never said she wanted to do art. She always told me to be realistic." She discovers that her mother, Susan, had been a talented playwright in college, but had given it all up to get married and raise children, burying her dream. Susan's shadow, that repressed dream, seemed to have passed on to Emily like an invisible curse. I sat there stunned. Was this synchronicity, or is it something deeper, like Jung's reference to the intergenerational links in the collective unconscious? Emily says she confronted her mother, and the conversation shook the family. Susan cried and admitted that she had pushed Emily to take the safe path because she feared her daughter would suffer as she had. But surprisingly, after that conversation, Susan began writing again at age 60. She was writing a play for a community theater in Cleveland. Emily and her mother now write together, healing not only their own shadows, but also their long, fragile mother-daughter relationship. Emily's story made me wonder how much of our shadow is truly ours, and how much is a legacy from those who came before us. I began to dig deeper into my own life. If Emily found pieces of her mother in her shadow, what was I carrying from my family? I grew up in a blue-collar Chicago suburb where my father John worked 12-hour days at the steel mill. He always told me, "Don't dream, Mike. Work hard, make money, and keep your head down." But as I began to explore my shadow, I recalled a forgotten memory. When I was 8 years old, my father told me about his days playing guitar in a rock band in high school. He laughed as he told the story, but I saw sadness in his eyes. I realized that my father had buried his musical dreams to become a family man. His shadow, his repressed creativity had influenced me, making me afraid to pursue my passion for writing. I decided to confront my father. I drove home to Joliet carrying a beer and a worried heart. When I asked him about his band, my father was silent, looking out the window as if he were looking at another version of himself. Then he told me that he had given up guitar after my mother became pregnant with me. "I didn't want my child to grow up deprived," he said. But when I told him about my journey, about Jung, about the shadow, his eyes lit up. The next week I almost fell over when my dad called and said he had bought an old guitar from a pawn shop. "Just for fun," he said, but I could hear the excitement in his voice. Now my dad plays guitar on the weekends, and I've never seen him happier. That moment was a twist in my story. Not only had I healed my shadow, but I had helped my dad find a part of himself. But then a bigger twist happened. One night while I was blogging, I received an email from someone calling himself the Secret Admirer. The email had just one line: "You're on the right track, but be careful, the shadow may fight back." I thought it was a joke, but my heart was pounding. A few days later, I started getting strange messages on Instagram, Jung quotes, but twisted, like, "The shadow never sleeps," or "You can't run away from yourself." I started to feel like someone was watching me. Was I becoming paranoid? Or was this another sign from the universe, as Jung said that my shadow was rebelling? I told this story to Jennifer, my former colleague, who now runs an educational foundation on the South Side. Jennifer, her practical mind, laughed and said, "Mike, maybe someone is just trolling you. But if you believe in Jung, maybe this is your unconscious testing you." She suggested I dig deeper into my dreams, and I began to see a pattern. In each dream, I found myself running away from a faceless shadow. I decided to confront it the way Jung suggested. Instead of running, I would stand still and ask it what it wanted. In the next dream, I did. The shadow said, "Stop hiding from the truth." When I woke up, I knew what the truth was. I had been putting off quitting my advertising job to pursue writing full-time because I was afraid of failure. The next twist came like a storm. I handed in my resignation, and my boss, Brian, called me into his office. I thought he was going to convince me to stay, but instead he said, "Mike, I've been following your blog. You have a gift for storytelling. There's a project here, an advertising campaign based on true stories. Do you want to lead?" I was stunned. Was this synchronicity or a trap to keep me? I declined because I knew I needed to leave to be true to myself. But Brian added, "If you change your mind, the door is always open." That moment made me realize that when you dare to walk your own path, the universe doesn't just send signs. It opens up opportunities you never expected. I started freelancing, writing for magazines in Chicago and New York, but my shadow wouldn't let go easily. One night I received another message from mystery admirer, "You think you're out, but you're still running." I began to doubt myself. Was I deluding myself, thinking I had found the real path? I called Tom, an engineer in San Francisco, for advice. Tom told me that he had also received strange emails when he started photography. It could be a Jung fan, he joked, but then he said seriously, "Or it could be you. Mike, your shadow is telling you not to stop." Tom's words got me thinking. I decided to conduct an experiment. I would confront the mystery admirer directly. I replied to the email writing, "Who are you and what do you want?" Surprisingly, I got a response almost immediately. The person said they were a reader of my blog living in Minneapolis, and they were so obsessed with Jung's ideas that they wanted to test people like me to see if they were truly living authentically. They apologized for scaring me and said they were just trying to motivate me. I didn't know if I should believe them, but that moment was a reminder the shadow isn't just inside us. It can be reflected in others, in the challenges life throws at us. This story took on even more drama when I received an offer from a publisher in Boston. They had read my blog and wanted me to write a book about my journey of self-discovery inspired by Jung. I almost jumped for joy, but then my shadow whispered, "Are you sure you're good enough?" I realized that no matter how far I went, the shadow of doubt was always there. Jung said that we never really erase the shadow. We just learn to live with it to make it a part of us. I flew to Boston to meet with the publisher, and there I met Anna, the high school teacher I mentioned earlier. Anna was in Boston to speak at an education conference about her book. We had coffee in a small cafe near Harvard Square, and she told me that she had just gone through a major traumatic event. One of her students, a 16-year-old girl named Mia, had attempted suicide because of the pressures of her family and school. Anna, using what she had learned from Jung, talked to Mia and helped her start a journal to explore her shadow, the fear of never being good enough. Mia is now recovering, and she has started writing poetry, a way to express what she couldn't put into words. The Mia's story made Anna realize that her personal journey wasn't just for her, it could save someone else's life. Listening to Anna, I felt a jolt of electricity run through me. I realized that my book wasn't just about me, it was about Emily, Tom, Sarah, James, Anna, Mia, and everyone else struggling to find themselves. I returned to Chicago with a fire in my belly, writing day and night, pouring my heart into every page. But then another twist came. One morning I got a call from Jennifer. She said her organization was in financial trouble and she was considering closing it. "I thought I had failed," she said, her voice breaking. I drove to the South Side to meet her, and we sat in her small office, surrounded by colorful posters drawn by children. I reminded Jennifer about synchronicity, about how she had found her path through a dream and a random email. "Maybe this is a sign," I said. "Maybe the universe is asking you to look deeper." Jennifer wiped away her tears and agreed to try again. She organized a crowdfunding event, and miraculously, a major donor in Chicago, who had read my blog, decided to invest in her organization. Jennifer called me and shouted down the phone, "Mike, you were right. The universe is listening." That moment was a reminder that when you trust your journey, even the darkest moments can lead you to the light. But my story doesn't end there. One night, while I was editing the book manuscript, I received a text message from Lisa, who was exhibiting in Pilsen. She said that one of her paintings, an abstract of a locked door, had been bought by a collector in New York. But the shocking thing was that the collector turned out to be Emily's mother, Susan. Susan said that Lisa's painting reminded her of her own journey and Emily. I could hardly believe it was this synchronicity, or was it something bigger? As Jung would say, a deep connection between us all. I began to realize that my journey, Emily's, Jennifer's, everyone I met were not individual stories. They were part of a larger picture, an invisible network that connected us through shadow, through dreams, through synchronicity. Jung called this the collective unconscious, the idea that we all share a deep reservoir of memories, dreams, and truths. And as I continued to write the book, I felt like I was telling not just my story, but the story of all of us. But then a new challenge arose. One day, as I was walking through Lincoln Park, I got a call from an unknown number. The person on the line was a reporter from a Los Angeles newspaper saying they wanted to interview me about the book. I was excited, but then they asked, "What proof do you have that your stories are true? How do we know you're not making them all up?" I felt like I'd been slapped in the face. The shadow of doubt rose again, whispering that I was a fraud, that I wasn't good enough. I almost wanted to cancel the interview, but then I remembered Jung's words. The shadow is strongest when you turn your back on it. I decided to face it. I flew to Los Angeles, bringing with me my journal emails from readers and photos from meetings in Chicago. In the interview, I didn't just tell my story. I told Emily's, Tom's, Sarah's, all the people whose lives Jung had changed. The reporter, a woman named Rachel, finally said, "I don't know if I believe in synchronicity, but I believe in you." The interview was published, and my book became a mini phenomenon, selling in bookstores from Seattle to Miami. But success wasn't the destination. When I returned to Chicago, I received an email from David, a doctor in Los Angeles. He said his book of poems had been nominated for a literary award, but he was struggling with his shadow, the fear that he didn't deserve it. I called him and we talked for hours. David confessed that he had thought about giving up poetry, but my interview had inspired him to keep going. "You reminded me that the shadow is not the enemy," he said. "It's the teacher." David's story made me realize that this journey has no end. Every day is an opportunity to listen, to face, to grow. And as I sit here sharing this story with you, I want you to know that you are a part of it too. Wherever you are, New York, Dallas, or a small town in Montana, you have the power to face your shadow, to recognize your synchronicities, to become your true self. Start today. Write a truth. Do something brave. Trust that the universe is listening. And I'll keep telling this story because I know you're still here, still wanting to hear more. Let me tell you about another moment, one that almost makes me believe Jung was looking down and smiling. One day, as I was walking down the magnificent mile, I saw a woman sitting on a bench reading Man and His Symbols. I couldn't resist, so I went up and asked, "You like Jung?" She looked up, smiled, and said, "This book saved me." It turns out she's Claire, a Chicago lawyer who left a high-paying job to start an organization that helps women escape domestic violence. She says Jung's idea of individuation helped her find her purpose. We talked for hours, and when we parted, she said, "Thank you for stopping. This is synchronicity." Claire's story reminds me that we never know how big an impact we can have. A random conversation, a blog post, a video, they can all be part of the synchronicity network Jung spoke of. And as I continue my journey, I know there are so many stories waiting to be told, so many shadows waiting to be faced, so many dreams waiting to be relived. Will you be a part of this story? Share your truth. Let the world hear your voice. Because when you do, you don't just change your life, you change the universe. Claire's story in Millennium Park felt like I was living in a Jungian book where everything seemed connected by an invisible thread. But just when I thought I had reached the pinnacle of synchronicity, a new storm hit more powerful and unexpected than anything I had ever experienced. One afternoon, as I sat in a coffee shop in River North editing a book manuscript, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unlisted number. It read, just one line, "Look into your past. Mike. Your shadow begins there." My heart stopped. P. Was this mystery admirer back, or a new prank? I tried calling back, but the number didn't exist. A creepy feeling gripped me as if my shadow wasn't just in my mind, but was alive somewhere out there watching me. I decided not to let fear take over. Jung had said that shadows are most dangerous when you run from them, so I started digging into the past the message referred to. I dug up old memories, things I'd tried to forget. When I was in high school in Joliet, I'd been a shy kid, always on the sidelines of groupies. I'd entered a short story contest at school, and my story had won first place. I remember feeling proud when my teacher read my work aloud to the whole class. But then a group of classmates started making fun of me, calling me a dreamy poet, and saying that writing was a girl thing. I swore to myself that I would never write again, and I buried that dream deep inside. Is that where my shadow started, the fear of judgment? The fear of not fitting in? I called Emily to share this story because she knew what it felt like to be forced to hide a part of yourself. Emily is now working with her mother Susan on a new play in Cleveland, and she said that she had also come to terms with a painful memory. As a child, Emily had performed in a play she had written for school, but her father Robert had laughed at her and told her she should focus on math. "I think that's when I started hating myself," Emily said. But what was shocking was that when she asked her father about it, Robert confessed that he had wanted to be an actor, but his family had pressured him to become an engineer. His shadow, his buried dream of the stage, had inadvertently passed on to Emily, making her feel ashamed of her passion. Now, Robert is taking acting classes at a community theater, and he even played a small part in Emily's play. "I can't believe it," Emily laughed over the phone. "My dad is acting, and I feel like the whole family is healing." Emily's story made me wonder how many of us carry the shadow of our parents, our grandparents, without even knowing it. I decided to go back to my dad, John, to learn more about his past. This time I brought a gift, a notebook for him to write down, songs he wrote on his guitar. When I gave it to him, he looked at me with tears in his eyes and said, "You know, Mike, I thought I was going to be a musician. But when your dad died, I had to work to support my family. I told myself that dreams weren't important. I realized that my dad's shadow, his sacrifice of his dream, had caused me to grow up believing that passion was a luxury. But when I encouraged him to write, he began writing a song about his younger days. and he emailed it to me. When I heard the song, I cried, not because I was sad, but because I felt like my dad was finally being himself. But then came a bigger twist. One morning, while I was jogging along the shore of Lake Michigan, I received an email from someone calling himself The Observer. The email contained an old, faded photo of me as a child, standing on a school stage, holding a piece of paper, perhaps a short story I had written. Beneath the photo were the words, "You have forgotten who you are. Remember." I almost dropped my phone. Who had taken this photo? And how did they get it? I began to feel like I was being pulled into a psychological game, as if my shadow was not just a part of my mind, but a living entity manipulating my life. I contacted Tom, the photographer in San Francisco, because he had talked about the strange emails he had received. Tom said he had just received a similar message with an old photo of himself as a child holding his father's camera. "I think someone is trying to scare us," Tom said. "But if you look at it the way Jung does, maybe this is our unconscious trying to force us to confront the past." Tom decided to look into the source of the photo and discovered that it had been sent from a fake email account, but it had a link to an online forum about Jungian psychology. It turned out that this forum was where Jungian enthusiasts shared challenges to help others discover their shadow. The Observer was apparently a member of the forum, but that didn't stop me from feeling creepy. I decided to join the forum to find out more. I signed up anonymously and started reading the posts. Some people shared stories about how they had dealt with their shadow, but one topic gave me chills. Your shadow can control you. One member, calling himself Shadow Walker, wrote that the shadow wasn't just a part of the mind. It could manifest itself through life events like strange messages or unexpected encounters. They call this the shadow effect, a phenomenon Jung never mentioned directly, but some believe is how the collective unconscious communicates with us. I'm not sure if I believe it, but I've started to notice more strange occurrences in my own life. One evening, while I was dining at an Italian restaurant in Little Italy, I heard someone at the next table mention Carl Jung's name. I turned and saw a middle-aged woman in a blue sweater telling her friend Jung saved my life. I found my shadow, and it changed everything. I couldn't resist, so I introduced myself and asked her about her story. Her name was Margaret, a therapist in Evanston, and she told me that she used to be a corporate lawyer, but felt like she was dying inside. After reading Jung, she began analyzing her dreams and realized that she had been repressing her desire to help others. She quit her job as a lawyer, trained to become a therapist, and now helps patients explore their shadows. But what shocked Margaret was that she once received an anonymous letter sent to her office that read, "Your shadow is waiting." She thought it was a former patient, but when she checked, no one fit the description. Margaret's story made me wonder, are we all me? Tom, Margaret, Emily being pulled into a larger web, something Jung called the collective unconscious. I began to record every strange occurrence in a special notebook, calling it the Synchronicity Journal. One day, while I was writing in my favorite coffee shop in Andersonville, an older man sat down at a table next to me and began reading Man and His Symbols. I felt that familiar shiver again. I struck up a conversation and he said he was Richard, a retired professor of psychology at Northwestern. Richard said he had met Carl Jung as a student in Switzerland in the 1950s. He said Jung was a strange man, always talking about dreams and signs as if they were real. But what stunned me was that Richard said he had received a letter from someone calling himself the Observer in the 1970s when he was writing a book about Jung. The letter said, "Your shadow knows the truth." I could hardly believe it. Was this a decades-old joke, or a phenomenon that Jung understood but never fully explained? Richard laughed and said, "Mike, perhaps you are being drawn into a mystery larger than yourself." Jung believed that the universe was not random. Perhaps your shadow is leading you to a truth you are not yet ready to face." Richard's words made me shiver, but also piqued my curiosity. I decided to dig deeper, not just into my shadow, but into the mystery itself. I contacted Jennifer to tell her about the Observer. Jennifer, in her matter-of-fact way, suggested that I hire a private investigator to find the source of the emails and texts. But she also admitted that my story made her rethink her own journey. She told me that her organization had just received another large grant, but this time the donor asked to meet in person. When Jennifer arrived at the meeting at a posh downtown Chicago hotel, she was stunned to find that the donor was an old classmate who had watched her struggle with family pressures as a young woman. The friend said he had read my blog, and it reminded him of Jennifer and her dream of education. "This is no coincidence," Jennifer told me over the phone. "You're creating ripples, Mike, and they're coming back to all of us." The next twist came when I got an invitation from a New York TV station to appear on a talk show to talk about my book. I flew to Manhattan, my heart pounding with excitement. In the waiting room, I met a woman named Laura, a producer of the show. Laura said she had read my manuscript and felt like it was written for her. She said she had been a ballet dancer, but had given up after an injury. After reading about Jung's shadow, she began teaching dance to children in Harlem, and she felt like she had found herself again. But the shocker was that Laura said she had received an anonymous email with the words, "Your shadow is dancing." She thought it was a colleague, but never found out the truth. The talk show went well, and I told my story, Emily's, Jennifer's, and everyone I had met. By the end of the show, I had hundreds of messages from viewers across the country saying they had started journaling, analyzing their dreams, or confronting their shadow. A woman in Miami wrote that she had quit a toxic job after hearing me talk about synchronicity. A man in Denver said he had started drawing again after years because of Lisa's story. I felt like I wasn't just telling a story, I was leading a movement. But then something bigger happened. One night while I was in New York, I received a package at my hotel. Inside was an old notebook bound in tattered leather with the words, "The shadow never dies." My heart pounded as I opened it. Inside were handwritten pages filled with notes about Jung, about shadows, about synchronicity, but the handwriting was not mine. One page had a drawing, a locked door, exactly like the door in my dream. I almost screamed when I read the last line, "Mike, you are the key." The package had no sender information, but I recognized it as being from Chicago. I flew back to Chicago, immediately taking the notebook with me. I contacted Sarah, a single mother in Portland, because she had been talking about receiving strange signs. Sarah told me she had just found an old diary of her grandmother, a woman who had been a poet but had given up to raise a family. In her diary, Sarah's grandmother wrote about dreams that were exactly like Sarah's locked doors, whispering voices. "I think my grandmother is trying to tell me something through you, through Jung," Sarah said. I sent her a photo of the mysterious notebook, and she nearly fainted when she saw a page in her grandmother's handwriting. How could this be? Were we caught up in a supernatural mystery or just an incredible coincidence? I decided to show the notebook to Richard, the professor at Northwestern, to see if he could decipher it. Richard looked it over and said he had seen notebooks like this in Jungian circles in the 1960s. He said that some people believed Jung's followers had created a shadow network, a secret group that sent messages to encourage others to explore their shadows. "You may have unwittingly become part of this network," Richard said, half joking. I don't know if I believed it or not, but I felt like I was entering a thrilling story where each new chapter revealed a bigger mystery. I continued writing the book, but now I felt like I wasn't just writing about Jung, I was living one of his experiments. One day, while I was walking through Grant Park, I got a call from Anna. She said that Mia, a high school student in Boston, had just won a National Poetry Award, and her poem was inspired by the idea of the shadow. Anna said, "Mike, you don't know, but your story saved Mia. She said that hearing you on TV made her want to live." I felt tears welling up in my eyes. Was this why I started it all, to create ripples that would change the lives of others? But the mystery of the notebook remained unsolved. I decided to hire a handwriting analyst to examine it. The results stunned me. The handwriting in the notebook didn't match anyone I knew, but the expert said some of the pages showed signs of being written decades ago. How could such an old notebook have my name on it? I began to suspect that the observer was more than just one person, perhaps a group or even an invisible entity, as Jung referred to archetypes in the collective unconscious. I know this sounds crazy, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. My story, Emily's, Jennifer's, all of ours, was becoming a larger mystery, a puzzle I couldn't solve. But I knew one thing: every step I took, every shadow I encountered, every moment of synchronicity I recognized was bringing me closer to the truth. And I want you, who are watching this video, to know that you are part of this mystery too. Whether you're in Los Angeles, Houston, or a small town in Wisconsin, your shadow is waiting for you. Listen to it. Face it. Trust that the universe is guiding you to a brighter version of yourself. It feels like I'm living in a detective novel of my own mind, with each passing day revealing another piece of the puzzle I haven't quite figured out yet. The mysterious notebook with the words, "Mike, you are," the key still sits on my desk. A reminder that my shadow and perhaps a greater mystery is waiting to be discovered. I thought I was pretty far along in my journey of individuation, but Jung once said that the path to self is never straight, and what happened next made me fearfully convinced that he was right. One morning, while I was drinking coffee at a small cafe in Bucktown, I received a text from Lisa, the artist in Pilsen. "Mike," she said in a panicked voice, "you wouldn't believe it. I just got a painting in the mail, no sender. It's exactly like the painting of the locked door I sold to Emily's mother." I felt a chill run down my spine. How could this be? That painting had been sold, and now a copy, or the same painting, had appeared. Lisa added that the painting had a small inscription in the corner: "The door is open." I told her to send it right away, and opening the email, my heart stopped. Not only did the painting look exactly like my dream of the locked door, but the writing was exactly like the handwriting in the mysterious notebook. This couldn't be a coincidence. Someone or something was deliberately leading me toward a truth I wasn't ready to face. I decided to meet Lisa to see the painting in person. When I arrived at her studio in Pilsen, Lisa was shaking, pointing at the painting on the wall. It was hauntingly beautiful, an old wooden door surrounded by swirls of black and gold, as if it were glowing from within. "Mike," Lisa said, "I feel like this painting isn't mine, even though I painted it. It's like it's telling me something." I looked closer and noticed a small detail in the bottom corner, a circular symbol with a dot in the middle, exactly like what Jung called a mandala, a symbol of wholeness. I told Lisa about the notebook and the observer, and she blanched. "Mike, I got a strange email last week too," she confessed. It said, "The painting is the key." I thought it was spam, but now I'm not so sure. This twist made me feel like I was walking into a maze with no way out. I contacted Emily to ask about her mother Susan, who had bought the original painting. Emily said that Susan still had the painting in her living room in Cleveland, and that she loved it. But when Emily examined it, Susan said that the painting seemed different. The colors were more intense, and she swore that it sometimes gave off a faint glow at night. Emily laughed on the phone, saying that her mother was probably imagining things, but I couldn't help but wonder, was there something supernatural going on? Or was this just our unconscious communicating, as Jung said? I asked Emily to send me a photo of Susan's painting. and when I compared them, I almost screamed. Both paintings had mandala symbols, but Lisa's had an extra detail, a small key hidden in the swirls. Was this the key the notebook mentioned? I decided to take things to Richard the professor at Northwestern because he seemed to be the only one who could figure it out. When I arrived at his office in Evanston, Richard was reading an old book on Jung with notes scribbled in the margins. He looked through the painting and the notebook, then looked at me strangely. "Mike, have you heard of the sacred circle?" he asked. I shook my head, and he explained that some of Jung's students believed that people who explored their shadow could inadvertently trigger a sacred circle, a series of synchronized events that connected many people like a spiritual web. He said that the notebook and the painting could be part of this circle created by those in the shadow network he had spoken of. "But this is dangerous," he warned, "because the shadow doesn't just want to be seen, it wants to be controlled." Richard's words made me shudder, but I couldn't stop. I started researching the sacred circle on online forums, and I found an old post by someone calling himself the Keeper of Keys. The post said that those who received keys, whether the notebook, the painting, or the messages, were being chosen to fulfill a mission to unlock a greater truth about themselves and the world. The post ended with a line that chilled me to the bone, "But be careful, the shadow will fight to keep the secret." I felt like I was being pulled into a thriller, but I knew I had to continue because Jung taught that truth comes only when you dare to face the shadow. I contacted Jennifer to share my discovery. Jennifer, now busy with an education organization on the South Side, said she had also experienced a strange event. One of her students, a 14-year-old boy named Ethan, had drawn a picture in art class that looked exactly like Lisa's, a locked door with swirling lines. When Jennifer asked Ethan about the picture, he said he had dreamed about it after reading one of my articles online. "I felt like the door was calling me," Ethan said. Jennifer sent me a photo of the picture, and I could hardly believe my eyes. It had the same mandala symbol and the same little key. How could a 14-year-old boy draw this? Was Ethan also part of the sacred circle? I decided to meet Ethan to find out more. Jennifer arranged for me to talk to him at the community center in Englewood. Ethan was a shy kid, bright-eyed but anxious. He said he grew up in a tough neighborhood where people told him dreams were pointless. But after reading my blog, he started journaling and drawing, and he dreamed of the locked door almost every night. "I think it wants me to open it," he said, his voice shaking. I asked Ethan if he'd gotten any strange texts or emails, and he nodded. He pulled out his phone and showed me a message from an anonymous account. "The key is inside you." I felt like the floor was caved in. Ethan, a 14-year-old boy, was drawn into the mystery along with me. The next twist came when I got a call from Tom in San Francisco. Tom said he had just received a package containing an old photograph, not of him, but of me taken on a talk show in New York. The caption on the photograph read, "You're getting closer, but the shadow is faster." Tom panicked, saying he thought someone was trying to intimidate us. I told him to calm down, but inside I was in turmoil. I began to suspect that the dark network was more than just a group of Jungian fans. Maybe they were trying to manipulate us, or worse, they were using Jung's ideas for some mysterious purpose. I decided to organize a meeting with everyone I knew, Emily, Jennifer, Tom, Lisa, Sarah, Anna, and David, to share everything and try to solve this mystery. We met at a restaurant in Logan Square, and the atmosphere was as tense as a thriller. Each of us brought a piece of the puzzle. Emily had her mother's letters, Lisa had the painting, Sarah had her grandmother's diary, and I had the notebook. As we laid everything out on the table, I realized something terrifying. They all had mandala symbols, and they all related to a key. Jennifer, with her logical mind, said, "Maybe this isn't about us. Maybe we're being led to a larger truth, like Jung said about the collective unconscious." That night I dreamed of the locked door again, but this time I had the key in my hand. When I opened the door, I saw a room filled with light with familiar faces. Emily, Jennifer, Tom, everyone smiling. But in the corner of the room, there was a dark figure, and it said, "You've opened the door, but do you dare to come in?" I woke up heart pounding and realized that this dream was more than a dream. It was a challenge. Jung had said that the shadow never disappears. It just changes shape. Perhaps my shadow was now a fear of what I would find if I kept digging. The next morning, I got an email from Margaret, a therapist in Evanston. She said that a patient of hers, a man named Paul, had just reported a dream identical to mine, a locked door and a key. Paul was a veteran living in Chicago, and he said the dream had started after he had watched my talk show. Margaret arranged for me to meet Paul, and when I sat down with him at a coffee shop in Uptown, he told me that he had been repressing the pain from the war, thinking it would make him weak. But after I talked about the shadow, he started keeping a journal, and he dreamed of the locked door. "I think it wants me to forgive myself," he said, his voice breaking. Paul showed me a scrap of paper he had found in an old shirt pocket, a piece of paper with a mandala symbol, and the words, "The key is truth." Paul's story made me realize that this mystery was not just about me or people I knew. It was spreading, reaching people I had never met. I began to wonder, does the shadow web really exist, or is this how the collective unconscious works? As Jung had said, I contacted Richard again, and he said he had heard of similar cases in Jungian circles in Europe. He told me that in the 1970s, a group of scholars in Zurich had deliberately sent shadow messages to trigger synchronicities in others. They believed that by doing this, they could awaken the world, Richard said. But the project was stopped when some people started going crazy under the pressure. Richard's words made me shiver, but they also lit a fire inside me. I decided to write a blog post about everything: the notebook, the painting, the watcher, and the sacred circle. The post went viral, and I received hundreds of comments from readers all over the country. Someone in Seattle said she'd received a letter with a mandala symbol. Someone in Miami said he'd dreamed of a locked door after reading my post. I felt like I was standing in the center of a synchronistic storm, and I didn't know if I had the strength to continue. But then came the biggest twist of all. One evening, while I was at home, the doorbell rang. I opened the door, and there stood a woman I'd never seen before, about 50, with piercing eyes and an enigmatic smile. She said, "My name is Helen, and I am the keeper of keys." My heart stopped. She said she had been following my journey since I started blogging, and that she was part of a shadow network, not a malicious group, but a community of people who believed in the power of shadows and synchronicity. Helen said that the notebook, the painting, and the messages were part of a challenge to help me and others discover our truth. "But the challenge isn't over," she said. "You've opened the door, but you have to walk through it." Helen handed me a small box, inside of which was a silver key engraved with a mandala symbol. "This key doesn't open a real door," she said. "It opens your heart and the hearts of those you touch." Before I could ask more, she was gone, leaving me with the key and a mixture of fear and excitement. I didn't know if Helen was real or just part of this mind game, but I knew she was right. My journey wasn't over, and it never really was. I took the key and sat down to write, not for the book, but for myself. I wrote about Emily, about Jennifer, about Tom, about all the people who were part of this story. I wrote about my shadow, my fears, my dreams, and the synchronistic moments that led me here. And I wrote to you watching this video because I know you too have a locked door, a shadow, a key waiting to be found. Take it. Open the door. Step in, even if you are afraid. For as Jung said, the greatest light comes when you dare to face the darkness. The silver key with the mandala symbol lies cold in my hand, as if it carries a weight far beyond its small size. The words of Helen, the self-proclaimed keeper of keys, still echo in my head. It opens your heart and the hearts of those you touch. But what does it mean to open your heart? And why does it feel like every step I take leads me deeper into a maze of mystery where my shadow is not just a part of my mind, but a living force testing me, guiding me, and sometimes seemingly stopping me? I know that this journey, as Jung taught, is not a straight line, but a spiral. And what happens next makes me realize that I have only touched the surface of truth. I decided to take the key to Richard the professor at Northwestern because he seemed to be the only one who could offer a sober perspective on what was going on. When I arrived at his office, Richard was sorting through a pile of old books, and he looked at the key with a strange expression on his face, as if he had just realized something. He told me that in the 1960s, when he was studying in Zurich, he had heard about a group of Jungians called the Keepers of the Keys. They believed that each person on the journey of individuation would receive a key, not a physical object, but a symbol, a sign that would open a deeper layer of the unconscious. But he warned, some of them took it too far. They tried to manipulate synchronicity as if they could control the universe, and that led to terrible consequences. I asked what the consequences were, but Richard just shook his head and said, "You have to figure it out, Mike. But be careful. The key doesn't just open the door, it can lock you in." Richard's words made me shiver, but I couldn't stop. I started carrying the key with me at all times like a talisman, and I realized that it seemed to attract more strange events. One day, while I was walking through Old Town, a homeless man looked at me and said, "You have a key, right? Be careful, it will take you where you don't want to go." I was stunned, asked him what he knew about the key, but he just laughed and turned away. I tried to convince myself that it was just a coincidence, but deep down I knew that synchronicity was at work, and this key was at the center of it. I contacted Emily to share the story. Emily, now working with her mother Susan on a new play, said she had also experienced a shocking event. One night, while she was rehearsing at a community theater in Cleveland, the stage lights suddenly went out, and in the darkness she heard a voice whisper, "The key is the truth." When the lights came back on, there was no one there, but on the stage floor she found a piece of paper with a mandala symbol and a picture of a key. Emily said, "Mike, I'm scared, but I also feel like this is a sign. Maybe we're being led to something bigger." I sent her a photo of the silver key, and she almost screamed over the phone. "It looks exactly like the picture on the piece of paper." How could this be? Were the key keepers targeting both me and Emily? The next twist came when I received an email from Sarah, a single mother in Portland. Sarah said she had just found an old box in her family's shed containing letters from her grandmother, a woman named Eleanor, who had been a psychologist who studied Jung in the 1940s. In one letter, Eleanor wrote about a key experiment she had participated in Switzerland, where researchers attempted to trigger synchronicity by sending key symbols to random people. But the experiment was abandoned when some of the participants began having terrifying dreams about a black door that would not open. Sarah said she had also begun to dream about that door, and in her dream she saw a key that looked exactly like the one she had found. My transformation. Mike. "I think my grandmother was trying to warn me," she said, her voice shaking. "And now I think she's warning you." I felt like I was being pulled into an uncontrollable whirlwind. I decided to call everyone, Emily, Jennifer, Tom, Lisa, Sarah, Anna, David, and Paul, to share about the key and what we'd discovered. On the call, Jennifer mentioned that she had just received a gift from an anonymous donor, a small statue of a door with a key. Tom said that he had just taken a photo in San Francisco, and when he reviewed it, he noticed a figure holding a key in the background, even though he swore no one was there when he took the photo. Anna said that Mia, the Boston student, had just written a new poem about a silver key that led to a room of light. Each of us seemed to be caught in the same web of synchronicity, and I began to suspect that the key keepers were more than just a group of people. Perhaps they were part of the very collective unconscious that Jung had spoken of. But then a shocking event occurred. One evening, as I was writing in my apartment, the lights in the house suddenly flickered out, and I heard a slow, steady knock on the door. I clutched the silver key, my heart pounding, and opened the door. There was no one there, but on the hallway floor was a letter in the same handwriting as the mysterious notebook. Inside there was only one line: "The door awaits, but you must pay." I slammed the door shut, feeling as if I were being hunted. I called Tom immediately, and he said he had just experienced something similar. A letter left on his doorstep in San Francisco with the words, "The key has a price." We began to wonder, were we going too far, as Richard had warned? Were our shadows fighting back, trying to stop us from discovering the truth? I decided to seek out Helen, the self-proclaimed keeper of keys, for answers. I dug through the Watcher emails and old messages trying to find a trace. Eventually, I found an address in Minneapolis where the mystery admirer had sent emails. I wasn't sure if it was Helen, but I knew I had to act. I flew to Minneapolis, key and notebook in hand, hoping to find out the truth. When I got to the address, a small house in the suburbs, I knocked on the door, and a middle-aged man named Walter opened it. He looked at me with surprise and said, "You're Mike, right? I've been expecting you." Walter claims to be a former member of the Key Keepers, but he left the group 20 years ago after witnessing what he calls a loss of control. He says the group was once a Jungian research community, but some members began to believe they could use synchronicity to alter reality. They sent key symbols letters, and even items like Lisa's painting, to activate the shadow in others. But Walter says the experiment went awry when some of the recipients fell into paranoia, believing their shadow was a living entity. Helen was one of those who stayed, he says. She believed you were the one chosen to complete the experiment. I was stunned. Helen wasn't just a random person, she was part of a decades-long plan. Walter gave me an old diary written by another member of the group, a woman named Abigail, who died in the 1980s. In the diary, Abigail wrote about a final key, a symbol that could open the door to the collective unconscious. She believed that the bearer of this key would not only discover his or her shadow, but also connect all of humanity to the profound truth Jung sought. But she also warned that the shadow would do anything to prevent that, even causing terrifying events to make the bearer give up. I returned to Chicago with Abigail's diary, feeling both excited and scared. I contacted Anna to share the story, and she said that Mia, her student, and Paul said he found peace through music, thanks to Daniel, who is now recovering and writing again. I stood before the crowd holding the mandala stone now, just a memento, and told our story. From the dream of the locked door through the dramatic rituals to the ultimate confrontation with the shadow. I said that this journey was not about defeating the shadow, but about accepting it, turning it into light. I said that each of us, from Chicago to Seattle, from New York to Miami, carries a key, a stone door in our hearts. And I invited everyone to write down a truth they have hidden, not to burn it or bury it, but to share it, to turn their shadow into an inspiring story. As people began to share, I felt a strange energy, as if we were creating a new circle of synchronicity, not to trigger a dark storm, but to spread light. A woman from Milwaukee said she had left a toxic job after reading my blog. A man from St. Louis said he forgave his father because of Mia's poem. A young woman from Los Angeles said she had started painting again, inspired by Lisa's paintings. Each story was a piece of the puzzle, and I realized that this was the real Mandala project, not a manipulation scheme, but a natural movement where people connected through truth and courage. But then there was a final twist, not from the Mandala Circle or the Breakers, but from me. As the event ended, I received a message from Sophie, now in Montana, investigating what was left of the ranch. She sent me a picture. A carving on the wall of an old building depicting a man holding a mandala stone with millions of people standing behind it. Below the picture were the words, "The key bearer will lead the way, but the door will always be open." Sophie said the picture was from the 1950s, before I was born. How did they know about me? Was I really the key bearer? Or just part of a larger synchronicity circle, as Jung said, where we are all keys, all doors? I sat in my apartment in Wicker Park, looking at the mandala stone, the silver key, and the gold key, and I wrote one last blog post. I told the story, the picture in Montana, and I said that this journey has no end. It is an invitation for all of us to face the shadow, to find the key, to open the door in our hearts. I urge people to share their stories not just with me, but with the world, because each story is a stone, a piece of the human mandala. And I promise that I will continue to tell stories not because I am the key bearer, but because I am one of the millions who are searching for the truth. When I hit publish, I received an email from someone calling himself The Observer, a name that used to make me shudder. But this time the email contained only one line, "Thank you, Mike. The door is open. No attachment, no threat, just a sense of ending, but also of beginning." I look out the window, see the morning light shining through the buildings of Chicago, and I smile. Jung once said, "The greatest light comes from the deepest darkness," and I know that when the shadow returns, I will be ready, because I am not alone. I have Emily, Jennifer, Tom, Lisa, Sarah, Anna, David, Paul, Daniel, Sophie, Grace, and millions of others, all of us opening the door together. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If this story touches you, share your truth in the comments. Write down your fears, your dreams, your keys. Be a part of the Mandala Circle. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Because as Jung taught, when you face your shadow, you don't just change your life, you change the world. I'll see you in the next video with a new story, a new door, a new key. Keep going and stay true to yourself.